So, um, I want you to picture something. It's exactly 3:47 a.m.
Right, the exact hour when the mind's defenses soften up.
Exactly. And we're in this unnamed city that, well, the source material says it exists in a sort of fold between Sao Paulo and Prague. And a detective steps into this studio apartment.
Just a standard, dingy studio apartment.
Yeah, but there's a dead body sitting in a chair. The door to the hallway is standing wide open. And yet, this room is somehow locked tighter than a subterranean bank vault.
Which makes no sense initially, right?
Right, because it's not locked with a deadbolt or like a retinal scanner. It's locked with an airtight, perfectly constructed philosophical argument.
And that detail right there completely shatters our conventional understanding of what a crime scene even is.
I mean, yeah, I'm used to, chalk outlines.
Exactly. We are so used to looking for tangible evidence, a shattered window or a fingerprint or DNA. But what we're looking at today is a universe where ideas aren't just abstract thoughts floating around in your head.
They're literal things.
Yes, they have architectural physical force. They can be weaponized.
So, welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are opening up a stack of highly classified notes, field investigations, and philosophical logs chronicling the MCU.
To Metaphysical Crimes Unit.
Yeah, the MCU. And we are shadowing a detective named Loa Priest as she hunts down a killer whose ultimate victim isn't a person at all.
No, the victim is meaning itself, capital M.
Right. And your mission, as you listen to this deep dive today, is to do something that is, honestly, incredibly uncomfortable. You are going to have to question the very language you were using to think about this case.
Because, as Detective Priest discovers, the grammar you use every single day might actually be rigged by the killer.
It's wild. Okay, so to understand how you murder a concept as vast as meaning, we have to start inside that impossible room.
The locked room with the open door?
Yes. The victim in the chair is Emile Voss. He's this philosopher who operated deep in the city's intellectual underground. And there's no poison in his system.
No blunt force trauma, no bullet hole.
Nothing. But in his right hand, he is gripping this note that reads, in all caps, I'll just read it here, "I know who did it, but the language I need to say it hasn't been invented yet."
It gives me chills every time.
Okay, let's unpack this, because this is where my brain just started doing complete backflips. The door is visibly open, but the room is sealed by an ontological argument, like an argument about the nature of existence.
Right. And what's fascinating here is that the killer built a murder weapon out of pure logic. We need to look at the classic philosophical proof for the existence of God.
Okay, lay it on me.
Specifically, the proof of a necessary being. Philosophers like Anselm argued that if you can conceive of the greatest possible being, it must exist in reality.
Because existing in reality is like greater than just being an imaginary concept.
Exactly. Existing in reality is greater than just existing in the imagination. The killer, in our case, took that ancient logic, inverted it, and built a causally closed system.
The causative closed system.
Yeah, they proved that everything inside that room was absolutely necessary, completely self-contained, and totally immune to any outside cause. Nothing from the outside can affect the inside. Detective Priest calls it God's alibi.
God's alibi. Man, okay, let me try an analogy here. Imagine a perfectly coded software sandbox.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, if you work in tech, you know what this is. It's a totally isolated environment where a computer program runs and it's completely severed from the rest of the operating system.
Right, totally walled off.
Exactly. No external data can get in and no data can leak out. That's what this room is, but it's constructed out of reality itself.
But here is the thing about perfect code.
There is always a zero-day exploit.
Yes, a foundational flaw in the base code.
And Priest spots it. She's looking around this room, she looks at the window, and sees a reflection of the room. And in the corner of that reflection, there is a shadow without a source.
Which is a physical impossibility in a causally closed environment.
Right, because a shadow needs a cause. You need a light source, and you need an object blocking that light.
Finding a shadow without a source means there is a crack in the killer's airtight argument.
Wait, slow down, though. I'm struggling with this part a little bit. I get the philosophical counter-argument. It's the Kantian exception, right?
Yes, exactly. Immanuel Kant.
Right, so Kant pointed out that existence is not a predicate. Like, you can't just imagine a unicorn, define it as a creature that exists, and then, boom, a real unicorn appears in your living room.
Right, existence doesn't work like a property you just tack onto a noun.
I understand the logic error there. But how does a grammar mistake create a literal physical shadow that a detective can point a flashlight at?
Well, you have to remember the rules of this specific city. If logic has architectural force,
Okay.
if an argument can literally build the walls of a locked room, then a flaw in that logic manifests as a physical defect in the room's architecture.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Kant proved that the real world declines to be obligated by a logical proof. That refusal, that exact point where reality just rejects the killer's math, manifests as a literal tear in the fabric of the room.
So that shadow is the back door the killer built to slip out after committing the murder.
Precisely. They used a logical loophole to escape a logically sealed room.
That is just so wild. But, I mean, if this room is sealed by PhD-level ontological math, this wasn't a crime of passion by some street dog.
Definitely not.
Someone had to manufacture this logic. Where do you even buy a weaponized argument like that?
Well, Priest has to go down into the philosophical underground.
The philosophical underground.
Yeah, it's this vast black market where unlicensed ontologists, rogue epistemologists, and concept fences trade in raw ideas.
Hold on, like a black market for verbs?
Yeah, very much.
What does that even look like? Is there a guy in a trench coat in a dark alley whispering, hey kid, want to buy some conjugated predicates? It sounds completely absurd.
It does sound absurd until you see the damage it does. Priest meets a fence named Skylef who sells exactly that. He sells stripped predicates.
Stripped predicates, what does that mean?
He sells the verb to be entirely stripped of any subject, just pure unattached existence in a jar.
That is terrifying and fascinating.
Right, and through him, she learns about this guy called the Artificer. He's a forger of first causes.
Wow.
And he actually built the prototype for the ontological lock 7 years ago, but he genuinely thought it was just a harmless, theoretical academic exercise.
It's like the scientists who split the atom just to see if they could, never thinking about the bomb.
Exactly. But the bomb got built anyway.
And that brings Priest to the most terrifying figure in this whole underground scene. This concept hitman, known simply as the deletion.
Yes, an entity that literally assassinates ideas.
And the deletion is chillingly proud of his resume.
Hey, he brags about it. He tells Priest that he recently assassinated the concept of free will.
Right, and he made it look like a suicide.
Because mainstream neuroscience was already driving the idea of free will to the edge of the cliff anyway.
He just gave it a little push.
Yeah. He also admits to slowly poisoning objective truth over several decades.
But his current contract is the big one. He has a hit out on consciousness.
Right.
Which begs the question, who puts a hit out on consciousness? The deletion claims the contract isn't funded by a person, but by an entity weaponizing the eliminativist position.
Which is a real philosophical stance, by the way.
Yeah, it's the stance that consciousness is nothing but an illusion. That the felt quality of experience, like what it actually feels like for you to be alive, to love someone, to feel pain, is just mechanical noise.
Just a byproduct of wet meat in the skull.
Right, signifying absolutely nothing.
The killer here is pure contingency. It is the literal embodiment of groundlessness. This entity wants to prove that absolutely nothing matters.
Nothing at all.
And take that a step further. In a universe of pure contingency, where everything is just a random, meaningless accident of physics, a crime isn't actually a crime.
Because the concept of wrong just vanishes.
Exactly. It's just another word for what happened.
Okay, I have to push back here because my brain is breaking again. Let's say I accept this premise. How on earth do you put handcuffs on an abstract concept?
Well,
Like, are they drafting an arrest warrant for entropy? Fighting this killer sounds totally unmoored from reality. How do you cuff a worldview?
you don't look for it in an alley. You look at how that concept operates inside of you.
Inside of me.
Yeah, think about your own life. Think about those moments of deep, crushing cynicism. The moments at 3:47 a.m. when you are lying awake staring at the ceiling and that heavy voice in your head says, "Nothing I do matters."
It's all just random noise. Why even try?
Exactly. What the source text suggests is terrifying. It argues that this feeling isn't just depression or exhaustion. In the context of this investigation, that late-night dread is the killer's argument actively invading your mind.
Oh, man.
It's the killer trying to colonize the investigator's consciousness.
That is deeply unsettling. If that heavy feeling is actually a hostile entity, then Priest is up against something that owns the very structure of her thoughts.
Right, she can't fight it normally.
If she uses her everyday vocabulary to try and fight it, she's basically playing on the killer's home turf. She can't just read this thing its Miranda rights. She has to invent a completely new way to speak.
So she realizes she has to go back to the locked room. to that shadow without a source.
To find the killer, she has to interrogate the prime suspect, whose alibi was used to build the room in the first place.
God. Or, well, in the strict terms of the argument, the necessary being at the center of the ontological lock.
So Priest does the unthinkable. She steps directly through the shadow in the window's reflection.
She literally steps through the Kantian exception.
And into the argument itself. And she finds a presence there. And the presence explains that it didn't kill Emile Voss. It is entirely innocent.
It is simply the ground of meaning that the killer is trying to destroy.
And as an innocent witness, this presence gives Priest the true name of the killer. But there's a massive catch.
Always a catch.
The name is pre-linguistic.
Right, because existing human language relies heavily on a subject-predicate structure. We divide the world into things and the properties of those things.
The noun and the verb.
Exactly. The apple and its redness. The killer uses this exact grammatical structure as a trap. It turns the grammar of description into the architecture of a closed system.
See, here's where it gets really interesting. Trying to use ordinary language to catch this killer is like trying to use a corrupt operating system to run a virus scan.
Oh, that's a perfect way to put it.
The grammar itself is compromised. It will hide the virus every single time because the virus wrote the code.
So Priest realizes she has to finish the work that Emile Voss died trying to complete. She locks herself in her apartment for 3 days, surviving on nothing but black coffee and sheer willpower.
Naturally.
And she finalizes a fragment of Voss's barely language.
Okay, I need a concrete example of this because it sounds impossible. What does a barely language actually sound like? If normal language traps meaning, how does this new language free it?
Let's use your apple example. In ordinary language, you say the apple is red.
Right.
You've chained the subject to the predicate. You have trapped the apple inside the concept of redness using the verb is.
Okay, I follow.
Voss's barely language separates the pure subject from the pure predicate and refuses to combine them. It sounds something like apple, redness.
Oh, wow.
It forces the human mind to make the leap between the two concepts. It lets the meaning live safely in the unsaid gap between the words, pointing at the truth without ever letting the killer's grammar build a cage around it.
So she writes the killer's pre-linguistic name in this new barely language inside her locked journal, and she brings it to the court of last resort.
The underground tribunal.
Yeah, this clandestine midnight tribunal made up of all these black market philosophers and concept fences.
Yeah.
She stands before them and speaks the name. But there are no handcuffs. The sentence handed down by the court isn't prison. The sentence is simply to continue the work, to keep building this new language.
Because exposure is the only form of justice in a metaphysical crime. The killer murdered Emile Voss specifically to prevent the naming. Therefore, the punishment is the very existence of the language the killer tried to destroy.
Voss didn't die a victim in that chair. He died a martyr who left Priest a map.
The transmission of his defiant decision to confirm that meaning is real, is the true victory here.
But, I mean, if this underground court is so effective, why doesn't the killer just stay in the shadows? Because 8 months after the court convenes, Priest is called to a second locked room.
The killer is escalating. They aren't content with just the underground anymore. They are actively rewriting the rules of the surface world.
So Priest arrives at a second room with an identical seal and an identical ontological lock. But the victim this time is Yale Oren.
She was a brilliant translator who bridged the gap between underground philosophy and mainstream surface world disciplines, like neuroscience and mathematics.
And unlike Voss, she didn't die holding a note about missing language. She died holding a completed mathematical proof.
This part is so cool.
She used Gödel's incompleteness theorem to formally demonstrate that consciousness is irreducible. She basically exposed the killer's eliminativist framework as structurally flawed.
We really need to make sure we understand how monumental this is. Kurt Gödel was a real mathematician who proved something that shook the absolute foundations of logic.
Right, in the real world.
Yes. Imagine a giant, incredibly complex rulebook that contains every single rule of arithmetic. Gödel proved mathematically that no matter how massive you make that rulebook, there will always be a true mathematical statement that the book cannot prove from within its own pages.
You have to step outside the rulebook to see that the statement is true.
Exactly.
Let me make sure I'm following this, though.
Mm-hmm.
If the eliminativists, the killer's ideology, claim that the human brain is just a mechanical rulebook,
Right, a meat machine.
a meat machine following strict physical laws, then it shouldn't be able to step outside itself. But consciousness is the act of stepping outside.
Yes.
The very fact that we can understand Gödel's theorem proves that our minds are doing something a purely mechanical system cannot do.
You've got it perfectly. Oren used the cold, hard language of mathematics to prove that human beings are not just math.
It's brilliant.
She mathematically proved that the killer's ideology is a lie, but the tragedy is that she died doing it. Mathematics is the language the surface institution trusts. The killer knows this and has been subtly cultivating mainstream thinkers for decades.
Basically an intellectual algorithm. The killer is subtly radicalizing academics, making the path of least resistance feel like intellectual honesty.
It's insidious.
It's like a social media feed slowly feeding you more and more cynical, nihilistic content. At first you resist it, but eventually the algorithm trains you, and you start to think you came up with this bleak worldview entirely on your own.
The killer makes the void feel like a revelation, and the underground tracks this cultivation process to a highly distinguished mainstream philosopher named Marcus Cale.
Right. Cale is a fixture of the surface world.
He has spent 30 years writing prestigious papers that subtly advance the killer's agenda of meaningless contingency, and he's completely unaware that he is acting as an asymptomatic carrier for this entity.
So Priest takes Yale Oren's mathematical proof directly to Cale's office at his university. And instead of bursting in, flashing a badge, and accusing a tenured professor of metaphysical crimes, she sits down.
She takes a totally different approach.
She shows him the proof. She offers him the underground's context. She speaks to him using fragments of Voss's barely language. And Cale looks at his own life's work, and the horror just washes over him. He realizes he's been manipulated for 30 years.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the tactic Priest uses here is absolute genius.
Yeah, it really is.
Cale agrees to take Oren's proof, put his own prestigious mainstream endorsement on it, and publish it in top-tier academic journals. They aren't just fighting philosophy with philosophy anymore.
They are smuggling the cure through the exact same institutional doors the killer used to spread the disease.
Exactly. They are bringing the underground into the light. They are translating the defense of meaning into a language the rest of the world can understand, validate, and actually teach.
So what does this all mean for us? We've traveled through impossible locked rooms sealed by logic. We've seen hitmen who murder the concept of free will. And we've sat in midnight courts that sentence people to invent entirely new grammars.
It's been a journey.
But as Priest walks away from Cale's office, she realizes the case is not closed. It never will be.
The murder of meaning is an ongoing crime. It requires an ongoing investigation.
Because meaning isn't some magical physical force baked into the bedrock of the universe like gravity.
No, it is a daily collective decision. The ground of meaning is made up of people actively choosing to understand one another.
Every single time you try to communicate with someone, every time you reach across the terrifying gap between your mind and theirs, genuinely trying to make them understand how you feel or what you see, you are maintaining the supply lines of meaning.
Every conversation is a pushback against the void. You are actively fighting the killer.
The city doesn't wait for the philosophers to figure it out in their ivory towers.
The city survives because ordinary people keep enacting meaning 10,000 times a second in diners and hallways and living rooms. The act of connection is the ultimate rebellion against pure contingency.
Which leaves us with a final, slightly unsettling thought to take with you long after this deep dive ends.
Yeah, think about this tonight.
The next time it's 3:47 a.m. The next time you're lying awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling, and you feel that heavy, cynical pull.
That familiar voice whispering that your actions don't matter.
That you're just a random accident in a universe of pure, meaningless noise.
Ask yourself, is that really your own thought?
Or are you being cultivated? Is an argument standing in the shadow of your mind right now, hoping you'll just surrender your meaning and close the door behind you?